Hey there, and welcome into Maybe I'm the Crazy One podcast. And I'm your host, Alex Chandler. Never being one to share a take with anyone I know, I figured I'd start by taking down my ideas and sharing them here. Every week, we will explore parts of the sports world, and I'll give you my viewpoints. Maybe I'm a genius, or maybe I'm just crazy. Tune in with me and find out for yourself. Woo-wee! Welcome in, guys. It is episode 10, and I'm your host, Alex Chandler. This is Maybe I'm the Crazy One podcast. For those who have been here before, thank you so much for tuning back in. For those listening for the first time or for one of the very few first times, thank you for being here. I know we've said it before on this show, and I just want to reiterate it again. We can't do this show without your support, and we've gotten some incredible support this week. We want to thank you all here from the Maybe I'm the Crazy One podcast, Maybe I'm Crazy Productions. Man, we have a great show for you today. Real quick, if you haven't listened to our shows from the last few weeks or even last week, we recommend you go and listen to those as well. There are going to be some things from this show that tie in from all of the shows from the last 2 weeks. So I'd recommend highly going to listen to those. But that being said, you're here now. So let's listen to what we got today. Couple housekeeping items real quick. If you haven't, please go follow the gamer, KC Mito. That is M-I-T-O. Go follow him on Twitch, Facebook, any of your socials you can find him. He's up in there. He's a great follow. I played games with this man last night for 3 hours, 3.5 hours. We did some off-air gaming as well. So we had a great time. There's a great stream you should go watch. We talk all sports in between playing our matches. We get a couple dubs. You know, it's a great time. So go follow him. Go listen to that. Go watch his stream. Get some extra content if you would like. Additionally, I still plan to have a debate on Friday. However, there is plans for another show in case we don't get the debate partner that we are looking for. I think we have a couple really awesome things in the works as well. I just don't want to talk about them too early. So we'll get to those down the road here. But again, you're here for today. So let's go over what we're going to talk about today. I'm going to start the itinerary with what we're going to finish with, which is, of course, going to be the AFC West this week. We are finishing up our segments that we've had on the divisions, breaking down division by division. And because it's our last AFC division, the AFC West that is, that we've broken down, we'll then be able to provide you the playoff bracket and prime you for our playoff predictions, which will either happen Friday if we don't have a debate partner, or they will happen on Tuesday. But either way, we'll start breaking down the AFC West at the end of the show. Before that, we're going to talk about some more NFL topics. Before I give too much away, it originally started with one individual player, which we got some pretty big news about this week. But then as I dove deeper into the information, it became just a more overarching NFL problem. But first, we're going to have to start with a little bit heavier, some news. And it's because I want to provide the right amount of brevity to the situation. And that's, of course, the passing of Bill Russell this weekend. Now, being only a young man, I've never got to see Russell play. But in researching this topic as well as watching things and hearing things throughout the years, I've developed an admiration for the man. And so we're going to provide what we believe to be a proper respect for him. I hope everybody else can agree with that. And so that's where we will start here in just 1 second. I just want to get everybody ready for it. While it will be predominantly about basketball and what Bill Russell was able to accomplish on the basketball court, you cannot tell the story of Bill Russell without talking politics, without talking race, and without talking injustice. And so those things will come up throughout this process. If that's something you don't want to listen to, I would recommend you fast forward to the second half of the show. And just to be clear, this is not going to be me providing you my personal political feelings and beliefs outside of like agreement or discernment to what was happening to Mr. Russell and what he was accomplishing off the basketball court and on the basketball court for that matter. It's more so that these conversations can't happen because they were political conversations in the time. And so they have to remain political conversations where they are. Again, everybody, if you do not want to listen to this, if this is not a part of your belief, please fast forward. It will probably be somewhere around the 15 to 20 minute mark. I think I've provided ample time for everybody to tune out if they're going to tune out. If you're here, I appreciate you and thank you. In case you were unaware of the news, Bill Russell, all-time great Celtics center from the 50s and the 60s, passed away Sunday at the age of 88. When I heard and saw the news, it was hard. It wasn't as hard as Kobe because Bill Russell got to live an amazing life. But any time an all-time great dies, or any time a beloved figure dies, it's hard. And in the case of Bill Russell, he was both. And I'm not 100% sure where that starts for him. In researching things for him, I learned that his father dealt with racism in the 30s and the 40s, which caused them to move to Oakland after he had found stable employment, because he originally was from Louisiana. He dealt with illness and injury throughout his childhood to where the fact that he ended up being an all-time great basketball player was not even going to be a thought. At the age of 11, 12, his mother passed away from the flu. And all he did at that point was focus and dive himself into his studies and his work ethic to honor her memory. In high school, he wasn't a player that was playing 4 years. He got to start his senior year. And Coach Wolpert over at University of San Francisco saw that he understood the game of basketball better than anybody and offered him his only offer at the time to come play basketball, and he accepted. Because that's the only way he saw the ability to escape racism and poverty. Now, over the course of his career at the University of San Francisco, he couldn't play as a freshman, so he played 2 seasons. He played his sophomore year, and he played his junior year. During those 2 years, the University of San Francisco, the Dons, won 55 games in a row and 2 NCAA titles. During that time frame, he was a 2-time All-American, Player of the Year, and he developed the alley-oop with Casey Jones. Not Jackie Moon, by the way, which semi-pro would want to tell you. But it was Bill Russell and Casey Jones, and that was the University of San Francisco team. Then, he was so great that he went to the Olympics and won a gold medal. Because at that time, your NBA players didn't play in the Olympics. They could not. You could only play as an amateur. And so it had to be college kids or people that had not become professional basketball players. And in 1956, the age of 22 years old, he leads the American team to a gold title, or a gold medal. And let's think about the context for that for a second. Because in 1956, Bill Russell had to use his own water fountain. Bill Russell had to use his own hotels. Bill Russell had to do everything else that his white teammates couldn't do by himself. And he did it. And he was the best that he could be at. He was so good, in fact, that the Harlem Globetrotters wanted to sign him out of college. Except there was a problem. They didn't talk to Bill. No, they talked to Coach Wolpert. And they talked through Coach Wolpert. And I can't believe I read this, but it was accurate. I double fact checked it. Bill Russell declined the opportunity to go play for the Harlem Globetrotters because of the fact that Mr. Wolpert was the one that the Globetrotters spoke to. So since he said that his exact statement was, since the Globetrotters were too smart to talk to me, I'm going to be too smart to play for the Globetrotters. And he announced his candidacy to the 1956 NBA draft. From there, which by the way, in college, they went to a tournament in Oklahoma City, and every single hotel in the city refused to allow the team to stay there. Every hotel. They had to sleep outside, or they actually ended up sleeping in a dorm, a closed dormant dorm. And they attributed that to their experience and bonding and the reason that they were so great. University of San Francisco has 3 Final Fours. Maybe, I think it's 4 actually, I'm sorry. 4 Final Fours, 7 Elite Eights, and 3 of them happened with Bill Russell. 54, 55, 56. Granted, again, he didn't play in 54, but they win. But that's not the only thing that Bill Russell did at the University of San Francisco, because he also ran track and field. He did the 400 meters and ran it in 49 seconds. At the time, 46 seconds was the world record. The only difference was that Bill Russell was 6'10". You don't see sprinters at 6'10", let alone comparable and capable sprinters at 6'10". But that's not even the best part of it, because he was also a part of the high jump, where he was the 7th best high jumper in the entire world. The 7th best jumper in the entire world in 1955. So not only was he an incredible basketball star, he was also an incredible track star at the University of San Francisco. But you can't make as much money in track as you can in basketball, so there we be. He chose basketball. And so then he's drafted to St. Louis, and then promptly traded to the Boston Celtics. Boston never embraced him as a city. Boston embraced him as a player, but they did not embrace the man, Bill Russell. Where he constantly, and it was past 1964 and civil rights movement and everything like that. It was past everything else. It was just that he was a black man. The fact that Boston never accepted him. Not after he won a title in 1958 or 57. Not when he lost the title in 1958 because he was hurt. Not when he won 8 straight titles. I don't care if there's 8 teams in the league. I don't care if there's 10 teams in the league. There was 13 teams in the league by the time he was done, and 17 teams by the time he was coaching. That it wasn't that much of a discrepancy at the end of his career when he was still winning, but he won 8 titles. Then they lost a year, and then he won 2 more. All in all, going 11 wins in NBA Finals. And so we can talk about Jordan's 2 3-peats. We can talk about the Warriors winning 4 in, 7 years. We can talk about LeBron going to 9 out of 10 finals in a row. It holds no candles to what Bill Russell was able to accomplish in the 1960s and 50s. Also, those last 2 titles were won when he was the coach of the Boston Celtics as well as a player. In 1968 and 9, I believe, is the 2 years that it was. And he was also the first African-American coach in any sport. And this is all going on during the Civil Rights Movement, where he stood with Muhammad Ali. He marched with Malcolm X and Martin Luther King Jr. He was an advocate. He boycotted. He boycotted a NBA basketball game. It was an exhibition game, but he boycotted the game due to racism. And it's the same cycle in sports, where we don't want politics in our sports. And so fans get upset. And at that time, it was acceptable for them to get upset because it was okay to be racist. And he had to deal with people breaking into his house and writing the N-word all over his home in spray paint. He had to deal with when he would go out of town, people would come by his home and knock over his trash cans, which is a really funny little excerpt where he went to the police station and said, "Hey, people keep knocking over my trash cans." The police said, "Well, raccoons exist. It could be raccoons that do it." And Bill Russell was like, "It's not raccoons." And they said, "It's raccoons, maybe. You got to try the raccoons first." And he said, "Okay, well, since it's raccoons, where can I go get a gun permit?" His trash cans stopped getting knocked over. Bill Russell, in his NBA career, 11-time champion, 2-time All-American, 2-time national champion in college, a 5-time MVP with 9 top 3 finishes, and 11 total years where he received votes. 1 year was a 4th place finish, 1 year was a 7th place finish. He was a 3 all-time or all NBA first team awards. He won 3 of those in an era that Wilt Chamberlain existed and stuffed stats, but didn't win titles like Bill. And the other 8 times that he was an all-NBA player, he was second team. So he was never the 3rd best player in the league. He was always the 2nd. Or better. Blocks were not kept as a stat. However, there was a game where he had 13 blocks. Also, along with Wilt, he is the only player to ever average 15 points per game and 20 rebounds per game for their career. But the most incredible stat about Bill Russell and how he is the penultimate champion is that in winner-take-all games, whether it was in college, the Olympics, or in the finals, in a winner-take-all game, Bill Russell was 21-0. And so again, we can talk Jordan. That's totally fine. And you can tell me how great Jordan was because he never lost in the finals. Bill Russell lost in the finals, sure. But he was 21-0 in games where if he lost, they were done. Or if they win, they move on and advance to win a title. He was 10-0 in Game 7s in the NBA. So, with all of that being said, like I said, we can't tell the story of Bill Russell without politics. Where in 2013, for example, well past the civil rights movement, he came out, started a Twitter. His first post, "I kneel with Colin Kaepernick." Yeah. Even in 2013, at 79 years old, Bill Russell understood it. Bill Russell understood his responsibility, whether it was to the league, to the community, or to a culture. Bill Russell, while he was a man with a great smile and laugh and an incredible talent, the man who he was, we didn't deserve the man that we got. But he still gave it to us every single day of his life. His memory, his legacy, it'll live on. He was a part of the 25 at 25, 35 at 35, 50 at 50, 75 at 75 teams. All those anniversary teams, he was a part of them. The only reason we don't consider him the GOAT is because of the era that he played in. But at this point, there's no doubting that he was an all-time great, that he should be remembered as an all-time great, and that I hope his soul rests peacefully. And Bill, I hope I did you justice with this. I hope everybody believes I did justice for him. Because we'll never get another player like Bill Russell. And when we have it, we got to appreciate it. Now we're going to move on to a player who I thought actually had a lot of the same morals that Bill Russell had until about this time last year. The news broke yesterday that Deshaun Watson was only going to get 6 games of a suspension due to what Judge Sue Robinson had presided over. Now, the NFL has the ability to appeal this verdict, and I hope that they do, but I'm not entirely certain that they will. To fill those listeners in who don't know who Deshaun Watson is or what he's in trouble for, Deshaun Watson, over the course of the last year, has been accused by 24 different women legally and up to 60 of sexual misconduct and requests and using his place on the Texans to try to garner activity. And I think I've been pretty clear, throughout the process of these shows, that I don't really want to talk about this too much because it's an uncomfortable subject, because I just see it as blatantly wrong, and I just don't understand how anybody could come back and play sports after being accused by multiple women, let alone 24. And so my initial reaction was, wow, 6 games? Deshaun Watson's suspension is absolute bullshit. How could they only do 6 games? How could they see everything that's been presented? And if you want to say that the 5 people that were testifying, didn't do anything to help the cause, I don't believe that, because 1 got thrown out due to hearsay. So we really only had 4 people that were able to testify. 3 of those people have since settled with Deshaun. And, I don't think it broaches the level of, what Big Ben may have done in 2010. But there is precedent set for what he did in terms of the action in very vague terms, which is what is going to be utilized for a suspension like this, as sexual misconduct. What he did was sexual misconduct. And so then I was like, man, Calvin Ridley got suspended for 16 games, right? And then I was like, wait, no. He was suspended for 17 games. And if the Falcons make the playoffs, he's suspended for those games too. Which then got me digging a little bit further. And so then I looked up all the suspensions that have happened to a player in the last 10 years, which is coursing, I think, 4 CBAs. And so we start off with Calvin Ridley, 16 games for betting on a game when he wasn't with the team, because remember, he was away from the team dealing with mental health issues, but he bet on his own team to win and got a full year suspension. 365 days. Okay. Maybe that's a one-off, right? No. Kareem Hunt kicked a woman. Now, I've seen this video. Kareem Hunt kicked her twice. And what Kareem Hunt did was not okay, but she got up, she walked away on her own, and was just mad banging at his door, basically. And honestly, rewatching it, the worst part of it is the scrum that they're in prior to the kick. But the kick, the girl was on her, crouching like a catcher, and he kicked the leg out from underneath her. Again, not acceptable, deserved the suspension. 8 games was right. Greg Hardy, he got suspended 10 games, but he, threatened to kill a woman and headbutt her and beat the ever-loving shit out of her. Again, not right. Suspension, again, in that one, should have been more. And I think it did start as more, if I remember correctly, and was reduced. Michael Kendricks, 8 games for insider trading. Antonio Brown, 8 games for conduct deemed detrimental to the team outside of his contract. But then we get into the good ones, right? Because there is precedent, like we talked about. Big Ben got an original 6-game suspension that he appealed and then got 4 games back in 2010 when he was accused of raping 2 women in a bathroom. Okay. There was no proof there, so he got 6 games. That's like full-on sexual misconduct and absolutely terrible. And we all just seem to sweep that under the rug with Big Ben, but that's neither here nor there at this point. But the one I really want to focus on, which is the one that's probably closest to Deshaun, and that's Jameis Winston back in 2016-17 area time frame. Remember this? Where he was in an Uber, and he grabbed the girl from the back seat, and then, left. And it was reported that he did these things, and he didn't deny them. He got 3 games. And that one, I think, started as a 4-game and then went down to a 3 as well, but we didn't see the appeal process on that one. But he got 3. He did that with 1 woman. So let me get this right. With 2 women, Big Ben got 6 games. With 1 woman, Jameis got 3 games. Even if you want to count the rest of the women, the other 22 women that would not be accounted for in these 2 same scenarios, if you want, or even 21 if you want to count them as combined. If you want to count each of those women as half of a woman or half of a game, man, that's still another 10 games. He'd be eligible for the last game of the season, so it's effectively an entire season suspension. That's what should have happened. Instead, he got 6. And so, like I said, I went through all of these, and the biggest thing, because then there's also the Ray Rice one, which was 3 games. There's a ton of domestic abuse ones, like Darius Geis was one of them, for example, that, they got 6 games for domestic violence. Ray Rice, I said, had 3 games. Alden Smith got suspended multiple times for domestic violence and for possession and of a firearm and other things. But in all of these situations, unless it was a multiple offense, the max was 6 games, no matter how heinous the act, except for a few instances, which was Calvin Ridley's betting and Josh Gordon smoking weed. That's really the 2 times that we've seen people get extended sentencing. Non-violent things. Which tells me one thing. The NFL's conduct policy is fucking bullshit. There is no world where you, anyone else that was not a superstar professional athlete, if we were accused of sexual misconduct with 22 or 24, or if you want to take the high number of 50, if you want to talk with 24 of people that we are supposed to work with or work through because of our team, then yeah, I would probably get fired too. You would, and any other regular fucking person would. Because we have standards. We have expectations. And while Deshaun Watson is an incredible football player, and I thought he was an incredible man, that doesn't matter anymore. Because he's not. The simple matter of the fact is, he's not. You don't settle. That's the thing. If he hadn't done these things like he has said he has from the start, you don't settle. You fight it. And you fight through it. And guess what? At this point, if you continue to fight him in court, Deshaun, you have more money than they do. You can just outlast them. Because that's how the court system works. And if you want to use the court system to free your name, that's fine. But instead, you went the heinous route, not getting charged with a capital crime, not getting charged with a criminal crime, and these just all being civil suits, so you could easily get out of it. The NFL needs to take an action. This isn't a situation where a man served his time. He chose not to play last year. Before any of this information came out, he came out and said, I'm not going to play for the Texans. And the Texans said, cool. That's fine. And then once all this stuff came out, the Texans were like, yeah, just stay home for sure. But he wasn't suspended. He chose not to play last year. But yet, we want to act like he's quote-unquote served time, as I've seen on the socials. And that he has, he was out of football for a year. That was on his own. When Le'Veon Bell was out of football for a year, we didn't blame the Steelers. No, we said Le'Veon Bell was making a dumbass choice. And look where his career went. Man, Deshaun's going to get 6 games. I don't think the NFL is going to appeal their own decision. Because, by the way, this is an interesting fact. If the NFL appeals the decision, it doesn't go to an appellate court yet. It goes to themselves. And then they get to make the determination. Then Deshaun Watson would get the ability to sue the NFL for his right to play, and have his suspension, removed back down to the 6. So we'll see if he's suspended. I don't think he'll be suspended more than the 6 games. We'll see what happens. Ultimately, this week was a loss for women. And at this point, our country and the institutions that we have allowed to be in place continue to give L's to these women as well. To all of the accusers, I'm sorry you've had to go through this. You probably will never hear this, but I still want to tell you just in case, because I think it's important. I think it's important to know that your stories were heard and your stories were believed. Because if one person came out and said it, or 2 people, there's plausible doubt, right? Like the Big Ben situation, the Jameis situation. There's absolutely no doubt. To me, if 24 people who were a part of a lawsuit and over 50 total have came out, which we can talk about how the fact that he had 50 different masseuses is absolutely sociopathic in itself. But that gets too far into his personal life, and I've told you guys before this, I believe, I don't deep dive into personal things like that. But this is important. And we've already been super personal in this show with the Russell tribute. So might as well keep it going. Today I'm ashamed for the first time to say that I'm a fan of the NFL. And they can make that right by making a difference in this decision. And again, I don't want to spend too much time on this because at the end of the day, we get no control over what ends up happening. And at the end of the day, it's not going to matter what we think anyway, because the NFL obviously knows that we're still going to tune in. Well, I'm still going to do this show. We're still going to talk about the NFL every day. But I'm going to do my damnedest to make sure that I don't give this person, number 4, any special publicity on this show. I don't care if he wins MVP. I don't care if he's a 7-time straight Super Bowl champion. That man, at this point, a man that I used to admire, a man that I used to respect, a man that I one day hope that my child will grow up to be like. I no longer want to ever say his name in a positive context again. But just like Mike Vick and other people who have gone through reform, he can change my opinion and my mind. But as of right now, that's a strong stance that I have, and that's the strong stance that I'm going to take. And to expertly transition, it's about as strong of a stance that the Chiefs are going to have to take in the AFC West. Because, oh boy, it's time. We've talked about this division multiple times throughout the show so far. Not this show, but, other episodes. And I think it's time that we finally break down this division. As we always do, we're going to give you our storylines that we believe are important, key additions and subtractions from each team, ultimately ending with the standings that I have in the AFC West. Additionally, because this is the last division that we're talking, I will also give you the playoff bracket today, and we will talk all playoff brackets that I have, both NFC and AFC, on Friday, unless I have a debate partner. If I have a debate partner, then we will move that to Tuesday. And so let's get started. And I'd like to say, let's start with the biggest story, right, from the AFC West. But the thing is that all four teams made major splashes. You got the Chiefs getting rid of Tyreek. You got Russell Wilson going to the Broncos. Devontae Adams going to the Raiders. And Khalil Mack going to the Chargers. And you heard that right. One team lost a player, 3 teams added a player. So, what we're going to start with is our storylines, and we're going to start with the 7-time. And I think I said 6 times in the previous podcast, or show or episode. But it's 7. We went back and we looked. It's been 7 straight AFC West titles for the Chiefs. And so we'll start there. With Tyreek gone, can McCole Hardman, Juju Smith-Schuster, Marquez Valdez-Scantling, and Sky Moore be enough? Because they lost to Marcus Robinson, they lost Byron Pringle, they lost Tyreek, of course, in the trade. So it's going to be those 4 guys, 3 of them being brand new. Cole, who has been middling at best behind Tyreek. Are they going to be enough? Now, I know Cole came out the other day on, I think it was one of the other new media podcasts, and said, hey, I plan to be that Tyreek role this year, and I don't know if it's him, man. I really think Sky Moore was brought in to be the Tyreek Hill guy, but I could be way wrong. MVS, also the fastest player last year, and so they replaced speed with speed. He was the first player that they signed after the Tyreek trade, and then they came out and got Juju right after that, and then they drafted Sky Moore. And so is that wide receiver core enough? I don't know if Juju is the same Juju that he was in Pittsburgh with Big Ben. And then that being said, is he the 2019 version of Juju, or is he every other version? Who knows? And so that's a big thing. But then you look to the other side of the ball, right? And there was key departures there, specifically in the secondary with Charvarius Ward and Tyrann Mathieu. Now, they also lost Daniel Sorensen, which somehow is addition by subtraction. They also lost Anthony Hitchens, who hasn't re-signed yet. There's some stuff that's out there. So, I mean, their defense isn't as good this year. Now, they did go in and they got some defensive pieces like Justin Reed. And so the question is, does the defense, who was okay, honestly, last year, they were pretty decent until the AFC Championship game, but do they take a step back this year because Tyrann Mathieu's not there? Does L'Jarius Sneed take a step up because Charvarius Ward's not there? We're going to see some development happen. And to be fair to the Chiefs, I mean, they are the champs. They've been there for a reason. Good defense or not, they've been able to win. The difference is they've had offense. And so does that change for them? We'll see. And then the last thing is, Orlando Brown Jr. did show up to training camp today. He said he's going to play on the franchise tag this year, and we'll see where it goes. He also came out and said that he wants to be a Chief for life. Then sign the damn contract, bruh. Really, honestly, which then leads me to the question, if you're going to play on the franchise tag this year, is Orlando Brown going to make some business decisions? If instead of having that security of that 6-year, I think it was $50 million deal that he was offered, or $130 million deal, instead of, signing that deal, he, plays this year on the franchise tag at a lesser deal, also no security. Khalil Mack, Joey Bosa coming around that corner, his calf rolls up underneath him. Does he just let him go? Maybe. We'll see. I think he has more integrity than that. But again, we'll see. And will their record suffer this year? Spoiler, I think it does. We'll see. And so then that moves us on to the next debutante, if you will, in the pageant here in the AFC West. And that's the Chargers. Because the Chargers have had this expectation of being great now for a couple years. After Justin Herbert took over for Tyrod Taylor 2 years ago, there was a lot of belief that, Justin could have done what Joey Burrow did last year. And that was the expectation. They fell a little short of that. They make the playoffs. The storyline might be a little different. And so is Justin Herbert the answer? He had a great season last year, but there was times where he did look like a young kid. And is that going to plague them throughout the season? Not sure. But what I do know is that I think Justin Herbert is going to be better this year. I do know that I think that. So, and the reason why is because I don't know if the Chargers actually have a flaw. You look at their offensive line. I saw a video today of Rashawn Slater and Khalil Mack going at each other, and it was either Rashawn Slater being top 3 left tackle in the entire league, or Khalil Mack being lesser than, an average pass rusher. And I don't think that was the case because I saw the moves that Khalil was using. It was just Rashawn Slater was that good. And so, I think if you look at it, they're a quarterback. He's one of those guys that's in that second tier right now, but is a great quarterback. Remember, that second tier for me is the top 6 guys that can make the Super Bowl and win the Super Bowl. And then guys that will probably fall a little short of it this year. And there's a bunch of guys in that category where they're good enough to make the playoffs, they're good enough to lead a team to wins, but they can't win it by themselves. So they got the quarterback, they got Austin Eckler in the running back position, and then they also have Isaiah Spiller and Larry Roundtree, breaking up their 3-man triumvirate there. But Austin Eckler is the lead back. You look at their wide receiver group, they got Mike Williams, they got Keenan Allen, and then they have the kid from last year. I'm drawing a blank on his name right now. I do apologize. But they have a pretty good slot receiver that should project out to be a little bit better this year. Their offensive line has improved year over year now. Their defensive line, it's pretty good at stopping the run so far. Their linebacking core is Joey Bosa, Khalil Mack, and Kenneth Murray Jr., and their secondary includes Derwin James Jr. Guys, this team is really good. This team has great players at all levels, Pro Bowl players at all levels. I think they might be the class, but we'll see. The next big move is a move that I've said doesn't make that team much better, in my opinion. I don't think it's the difference maker. And that's Russell Wilson. And I don't think he is the missing piece that they have, especially after Tim Patrick was carted out of practice today. And I hope he's okay, and I hope he does come back this year. But typically when you're carted off, you're not coming back this year. So Tim Patrick, we wish you the best, get better. But because they lose Tim Patrick, Jerry Jeudy hasn't developed the way that he was expected to. Now, granted, that might be some of Vic Fangio. I'm not going to say it's not. He was a defensive coach. Nathaniel Hackett's an offensive coach. So we'll see what happens with Jerry Jeudy, and I could be way wrong on him. It would be weird that he'd be like the one Alabama receiver that doesn't go off, but, we'll see. He could be more like an Amari Cooper rather than a Julio Jones or a Calvin Ridley or Jalen Waddle, Devontae Smith. not those guys. He could be that second level of guys. So we'll see. But the biggest question for me here, because when you look down their key departures, yeah, they lost Noah Fant. That's true. But they also lost Shelby Harris, Kyle Fuller, and Brian Callahan from the defense. And Brian Callahan actually went to the Chargers. And those were all players. Now, granted, Fant, I know, had some injury concerns, but Shelby Harris is an excellent defensive tackle. Kyle Fuller was a serviceable slot guy, and Brian Callahan was a good cornerback too. Sometimes he could be a decent QB or a CB1. And so the fact that they lost those guys, and Vic Fangio for that matter, I don't know if they're able to keep it going on the defensive end. They still have Justin Simmons, don't get me wrong. They still have Bradley Chubb. But when you're taking these pieces away from your defense, one piece at a time, and you're replacing them with young players, it's similar to, I guess like a baseball team almost. Like the Nationals with the Juan Soto trade, getting all these minor leaguers. Like you're getting guys that are going to be good for you, I guess, in the future. But like right now, it doesn't help you win. And so it's kind of the reverse of going and getting Russell Wilson. So, does it change their record? Yeah, Russell Wilson makes them a little bit better. But how much better? Playoff better? We'll see. We still have one more team to break down. And that's the Las Vegas Raiders. And they took a big step forward. And I think, and I spoke about this last night if you listened to me on Casey Mito's stream. But I spoke about this a little bit more in depth last night. That team faced a ton of adversity last year. A ton of it. The John Gruden stuff, they had to go through that. They had to go through the Henry Ruggs situation. I can't remember exactly what it was, but there was one other situation that the team went through that was a pretty big moment. And they had to go through it. And they did it with a guy that was a special teams coordinator his entire career, and Rich Bisaccia. So, does Josh McDaniels make them better than they were with Rick Bisaccia? Probably. I know there was mixed reviews on his time in Denver, but honestly, he wasn't terrible, and his quarterback was Tim Tebow. Maybe we give him a little bit of credit there, because he was rocking with Tim Tebow, and I think at the end he even had Brock Osweiler. So, let's cut him a little bit of slack. He hasn't had a quarterback the level of Derek Carr as a starter, because Derek Carr is still better than I think it was Kyle Orton at the time. So that's a positive. Then they add Devontae Adams. They say, hey, we had Henry Ruggs. We thought he'd be our number one. Turns out it wasn't. Let's go get another guy. And when a guy like Devontae Adams comes available, you do go pay what you can for him. And I've talked about with our Madden ratings and our rankings of wide receivers, I wouldn't put him at number one this year just because I haven't seen it happen yet, and I'd like to see things happen. However, I think Adams works with Carr, and I think it works real well. I don't think he's better than he was with A-Raj, but I think it's more impactful yards because now it's him and Hunter Renfrow, and it's not a quarterback that only targets him. So he's not going to always necessarily have double teams. He also is playing with Darren Waller, another great pass catcher. He's also got two running backs in the backfield with Kenyon Drake and Josh Jacobs. So, ultimately, they've gotten better on defense. They spent, money and everything else on defense this year. So we'll see what happens. But ultimately, I know what you're all here for. I know the information you all want. And that's, Alex, what's the standings going to look like? Well, I'm going to tell you that there's two teams at 9-8, one at 10-7, and one at 13-4. And the two teams at 9-8 are the Broncos and the Chiefs. And I think the Broncos lose the tiebreaker here, and the Chiefs are the 3 seed or the third team in the West, and the Broncos are the fourth. I think the Raiders go 10-7. Their schedule, when you break it down, they have harder games up front, and they have easier games in the back of the schedule. And so it's going to look pretty bad, but then they're going to balance out. Similar to the Chiefs. I had the Chiefs losing a lot of games early, but then they go on like a 7-game win streak to end the season. And then, that of course leaves the Chargers at 13-4. So it goes Chargers, Raiders, Chiefs, Broncos. And here's the thing. I know Chiefs fans are going to get mad at me. And they're going to say that I'm a hater. And they're going to say, but we have the best quarterback in the league. It takes more than a quarterback. And the Chiefs are falling into this trap that they continue to fall into, that other teams fall into when they have a young quarterback that's great. Excellent. The Seahawks and Russell Wilson is a perfect example. And they paid the quarterback all this money, and then they move away from what made them them. In the Seahawks case, it was the Legion of Boom. They got rid of them piece by piece by piece. And with the Chiefs now, we're starting to see it, but their calling card wasn't their defense. No, it was their offense. Piece by piece by piece. And Tyreek is the first domino. Next year, they may lose another player like Orlando Brown. Okay, so now we don't have a left tackle. We don't have a wide receiver. Well, in 2 years, Travis Kelce is going to be 2 years older. Travis Kelce may retire. Oh. Piece by piece by piece. Well, then, what's going to happen after that? Joe Tooney. Got to replace him because his contract would be up at that point. Piece by piece by piece. The next year after that, your 2 rookies from last year, guess what? They're coming up for renewals at that point. Piece by piece by piece. Until you're replacing these pieces with other pieces and it's a ship of Theseus situation. These Chiefs are not the same Chiefs that we've seen previous years. The only thing that's the same is that they have Andy Reid, Steve Spagnuolo, Eric Bieniemy, and Patrick Mahomes, and Travis Kelce. Once those pieces start moving, if Spags gets another job, if Bieniemy gets a job, what happens? Piece by piece by piece. And so I think this is the first year we take a step back. And by we, I mean we see the Chiefs take a step back. And they still have a winning record, 9-8. But they can't win the division every year. Eventually they do have to lose it. The Chargers are an excellent team. The Raiders made the playoffs last year and are a good team. And the Chiefs are a good team too. But they're no longer an elite team. They're a team that has an elite player, a couple of elite players, and ultimately a really good team. Because at the end of the day, those 2 players right now, along with Tooney and Orlando Brown, are taking up $100 million in salary. So I think they do take a step back. But the interesting part is now all 16 teams from the AFC, we know their records. I've given you what I believe their records are going to be. And if you've been following along with us over the last few weeks, you will know who they are too. But in case you haven't been, that's totally fine. Let me go ahead and give you my playoff predictions right now. So in the first seed, you're going to have the Chargers, 13-4 like we just said. The 2 seed was the Bills. They had the second best record in the conference at 12-5. The 3 seed, due to a tiebreaker, would be the Colts at 11-6. The Ravens also are 11-6. They won their division. Remember, I said we're going to stick with what's got us there before. Lamar's never lost that division healthy. I'd love to see him and Joey B go back and forth, over the next decade winning titles. So we'll see what happens. There was some little trebly news when Lamar got to training camp, but I think all of that's going to get sorted out. I think we're going to be good to go. So then we get to our wild card teams, this is what everybody wants to know. We got 2 10-7 teams. The Bengals, who beat the Raiders and therefore have the tiebreaker. And then the Raiders. But then, there's 4 teams that go 9-8. And I'm going to do this in alphabetical order. It's the Broncos, Chiefs, Patriots, and Titans. The team that would finish in the 10th spot is the Titans. The team that would finish in the 9th spot would be the Patriots. So that leaves the 2 teams from the AFC West, the Chiefs and the Broncos. I think the Chiefs win. Like we already said that the Chiefs were the 3 seed, Broncos were the 4 seed in the AFC West, and so therefore by that same proxy matter, the Chiefs would still get the tiebreaker. They actually beat the Titans, they beat the Broncos twice, they don't play the Patriots, and so that's how that shapes up. We got Chargers, Bills, Colts, Ravens, Bengals, Raiders, Chiefs. That is your playoffs, which then just, as a primer for you guys on Friday or Tuesday next week, our matchups in the playoffs would be Chiefs at Bills, a rematch of that divisional round, but in Buffalo this time. Raiders versus Colts. And then Bengals and Ravens, with the Chargers having the bye. Again, as we talked about last week when we said the NFC, those matchups were juicy. These matchups are just as juicy, man. And so I hope it folds out this way. I hope everything with the NFL goes exactly to plan and we come off as geniuses. But hey, we might be crazy. And so, like I said, on Tuesday next week, if we have a debate partner, we will break down the playoffs right before we get our first NFL action of the year. Now, I know it's the Hall of Fame game. I know. It's not a real football game. It's a preseason game. But it's so exciting to have football back, guys. It's so exciting. And so I can't wait to break that down with you. Probably Friday, potentially Tuesday if my debate partner's available, and we'll go from there. Guys, that's our show. I appreciate all of you showing up, sticking around for this hour with me. I've had an excellent time talking sports with you here. And hey, you know what we say. Like, review, share, subscribe. We got to get our word out there. We're trying to move mountains. And I need your help. And so with that being said, we'll see you all Friday and let us know. Are we geniuses? Or are we just crazy here at Maybe I'm the Crazy One podcast? Either way, let us know. We enjoyed having you. Have a great week till we talk again. Thanks.